John Carter tugged at his stiff collar as he stared out the viewport of the frontier. Stars streaked by in bright lines as Earth's flagship approached the massive Galactic Council station. The space station looked like a giant metal flower with 12 petals, each representing one of the founding species. "Remember, this meeting is historic," Captain Katie Martinez said, coming to stand beside him. Her dark hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, not a strand out of place. "Humanity's future depends on making a good impression." John nodded, but inside he felt doubt. He had been chosen because of his friendly nature and ability to connect with different cultures on Earth. Yet the alien protocol guide sitting on his desk was thicker than any book he had ever seen. "I've studied some of it," he told Katie. "But honestly, if they want to know humans, they should meet a real one, not someone pretending to be something else." Katie frowned. These species have been following the same rules for thousands of years. They'd value tradition over everything. "Well, they haven't met humans yet," John said with a smile. "The docking procedure took 3 hours. Everything had to be done in a specific order according to council rules." By the time John stepped onto the station, he was already tired of the endless formality. A tall blue alien with 4 arms approached. "I am Siltork of the Andromean Empire, first greeter of the council. You will now perform the ritual of new arrival." John stepped forward with a friendly smile. "Hello there. I'm John Carter from Earth. Great to meet you." He extended his hand for a handshake. The chamber went silent. Several aliens gasped. The tall blue alien stepped back, as if John had offered him poison. "You address the first greeter before completing the 90 steps of humility." Siltork's voice rose in pitch. "And you attempt physical contact with a council member." Before John could respond, he noticed a group of floating gas clouds drifting toward him. These must be the Vaporians he had read about. "Nice to meet you too," he said, extending his hand again before realizing they had no solid form to shake with. The gas clouds turned a deep red color and began making high-pitched whistling noises. "They are signaling extreme distress," Siltork explained coldly. "You have now insulted 2 council races in less than 1 minute." John felt sweat forming on his forehead. This wasn't going well. He stepped back and bumped into a large ornate chair. Feeling tired from the long docking procedure, he sat down. The entire chamber erupted in shocked cries. "He sits in the chair of judgment." A small green alien shrieked. "Only council elders who have proven their wisdom for 100 cycles may sit there." John jumped up quickly. "Sorry about that." "No harm done, right?" An ancient-looking alien with skin like tree bark slowly approached. Unlike the others, this creature seemed calm, even curious. "I am Elder Gen of the Cronus species," the ancient alien said. "We have observed many new species join the council, but none have broken 3 sacred protocols within their first 5 minutes. Siltork stepped forward. "Honorable Elder, I formally request the immediate removal of the human delegation. They are clearly not ready for council membership." Elder Gen raised a gnarled hand. "Interesting. In 10,000 years, I have never seen such authenticity." The elder turned to John. "Tell me, human, did you study our protocols at all?" "I tried," John admitted. "But there were 700 pages, and the first chapter was just about how to properly enter a room." To everyone's surprise, the ancient alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Perhaps," Elder Gen said, "we should give the humans one more chance. After all, it has been many ages since the council faced something truly unpredictable." John smiled gratefully at the elder, not realizing he had just added another protocol violation by showing his teeth. Behind him, Captain Martinez closed her eyes and silently prayed that tomorrow would go better. Somehow, she doubted it would. Susan Wright paced back and forth in John's quarters aboard the Frontier. Her fingers tapped nervously against the massive book of alien customs she had brought with her. "John, you have to take this seriously," she said. Her voice was tight with worry. The council only gave us one more chance because Elder Jen spoke up for us. John lay on his bunk, tossing a small stress ball into the air and catching it. I was being myself, Susan. Isn't that what diplomacy is about? Being honest. Susan stopped pacing and stared at him. Not in this case. Some of these species have been following the same greeting rituals for 50,000 years. The Hectarians haven't changed a single word of their formal introduction since before humans invented writing. She dropped the heavy manual on his chest. John let out a small oof as the 700-page book landed on him. At least read the section about the formal dinner tonight, Susan pleaded. Just the basics. John sighed and opened the book. The dinner chapter alone was 60 pages long. It included detailed instructions on how to properly admire each dish, the correct angle to hold eating utensils, and a 47-verse prayer that had to be recited before the first bite. "This is ridiculous," John muttered, but he began to skim through the pages. Later that evening, the human delegation entered the grand banquet hall of the council station. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to display the actual stars outside. 12 different sections had been set up, each designed to make one of the council species feel at home. Captain Martinez kept a polite smile fixed on her face as she nodded to each ambassador. John tried to follow her example, but he was distracted by the strange sights and smells. "Welcome to the Feast of New Acquaintance," announced Siltork. "We will begin with the prayer of gratitude, followed by the ceremony of first taste." Everyone in the room bowed their heads. John quickly realized they were waiting for him to recite the prayer he was supposed to have memorized. He cleared his throat and began to improvise. "Thank you for this food and for bringing us all together. May this meal lead to friendship and understanding." His short prayer was met with shocked silence. The Hectarian ambassador, a tall insect-like being, clicked his mandibles in clear disapproval. "That was brief," Siltork finally said. "The traditional prayer has 47 verses. Quality over quantity," John replied with a smile. Before anyone could respond, servers brought out the first course. In the center of each table was an elaborate arrangement of glowing plants that pulsed with soft light. John's stomach growled. He hadn't eaten since morning. Without thinking, he reached out and plucked one of the glowing fruits from the centerpiece and took a large bite. The room went completely silent. He consumed the sacred bloom of Plivia, whispered a small purple alien to Exiltork. "The symbol of our eternal spirit." John froze mid-chew. The fruit tasted like a mix of mango and soap. He slowly swallowed. Sorry, was that not food? Susan Wright looked like she might faint. Captain Martinez closed her eyes briefly, as if praying for patience. "It is a religious symbol," Siltork explained coldly. "Not food." A server quickly placed the actual first course in front of John. It was a writhing mass of small tentacles in a bubbling green sauce. "Wow, that looks interesting," John said loudly, forgetting that the translation devices would broadcast his words to everyone. "Do we eat this, or does it eat us?" Several younger aliens from various species made sounds that seemed suspiciously like suppressed laughter. The older ambassadors, however, looked increasingly annoyed. Alan Lee, Earth's military attaché, leaned closer to Captain Martinez. "If they decide to kick us out, the Frontier's weapons wouldn't last 5 minutes against the Council fleet," he whispered. Martinez nodded slightly but kept her diplomatic smile in place. "Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Though if John keeps going at this rate, we might be at war before dessert." From across the room, Elder Jen of the Cronus species watched with what appeared to be amusement. The ancient alien's eyes hadn't left John since he entered the room. "This meeting of the High Council will now begin," announced Siltork, standing at the center of the circular chamber. "The topic is the human problem." The council chamber was closed to outsiders. 12 seats arranged in a perfect circle held the representatives of the founding species. The room was designed to be perfectly balanced, with no species sitting higher than another. Ambassador Zornax of the Hectarians rose from his seat. His insect-like body made a soft clicking sound as he moved. I have documented exactly 317 protocol violations by the humans in just 2 meetings. This is unacceptable. What none of the council members knew was that Lisa Johnson, a human communications officer, was listening to everything. Hidden inside a maintenance shaft, she had connected a small device to the council's communication system. Every word spoken in the chamber was being sent directly to Captain Martinez and John. "They're having a secret meeting about us," Lisa whispered into her communicator, "and it doesn't sound good." In Captain Martinez's office, John listened with growing concern. "They can't just decide Earth's fate without us being there," he said. Back in the council chamber, the debate was heating up. "I move that Earth be permanently banned from all council activities," Zornax continued. "They clearly have no respect for our traditions." The Vaporean representative, a swirling cloud of purple gas, moved to the center of the room. "The humans are different, yes, but their technology is advancing quickly. In another century, they could be a valuable addition to the council." "Or a threat," added another ambassador. "Did you see how they reacted when their customs were questioned? No shame, no apology, just more disrespect." Elder Gen of the Cronus species had remained silent until now. The ancient alien slowly rose from his seat. "In 10,000 years on this council, I have seen many new species come and go. Most fail because they cannot adapt to us. But perhaps we should ask, have we become too rigid?" This statement caused immediate uproar. "Too rigid?" Zornax's voice rose. "Our protocols have maintained peace for millennia, and also slowed progress," said a younger ambassador from the Proxian species. "My people joined the council only 800 years ago. We still struggle with customs that seem to have no purpose except tradition." In the corner of the chamber sat the representatives of the observers, the oldest known species in the galaxy. They were wrapped in gray robes that hid their forms. As always, they remained silent, watching the proceedings without comment. "I propose we vote now," Zornax demanded. "Earth should be." The doors to the council chamber suddenly slid open. John Carter walked in, followed by Captain Martinez. Every ambassador turned to stare. "Sorry to interrupt," John said casually, "but if you're voting on Earth's future, we thought we should be here." Sealtork stood, visibly angry. "This is a closed session. How did you even know we were meeting?" "Lucky guess," John replied with a smile. "This is outrageous." Zornax clicked his mandibles rapidly. "Entering a closed council session is forbidden. This alone proves humans cannot follow even basic rules." John walked to the center of the room, ignoring the scandalized whispers. "That's what I wanted to talk about, actually. Your rules. You are not recognized to speak," Sealtork said coldly. "Return to your quarters immediately." "No," John said simply. The single word echoed in the chamber. No one had ever refused a direct order from the council moderator before. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation," John continued. "About humans, yes, but also about the council itself." Captain Martinez closed her eyes briefly. This was not the diplomatic approach she had hoped for. But as she looked around the room, she noticed something interesting. Several of the younger ambassadors were leaning forward, listening intently. And in their corner, the mysterious observers had shifted slightly, their hidden faces now turned directly toward John. The council chamber remained silent as John stood in the center. Every alien eye, sensor, or sensory organ was fixed on him. No one had ever defied council orders so openly before. "I understand you all think humans are rude," John began, "and maybe by your standards we are. But there's something you should know about us." He turned slowly, making sure to look at each representative. "On Earth, we value what someone says more than how they say it. We care about actions more than ceremonies." Sealtork tried to interrupt. "This is not the proper." "Let him speak," Elder Gen said quietly. The ancient alien's voice was soft but carried authority. I am curious about the human perspective. John nodded gratefully to the elder. Earth has a long history. Many great empires rose and fell. Do you know what many of them had in common? Strict rules and ceremonies that couldn't be broken. He began to walk slowly around the circular chamber. While these formal empires were busy following their own rules, smaller, more flexible groups adapted and eventually replaced them. What does this history lesson have to do with council protocol? Demanded Zornax. Everything, John replied. Because many of your rules don't seem to serve any real purpose except to make it hard for new species to join. It's like you've created a test that only those who think exactly like you can pass. A murmur ran through the chamber. Several ambassadors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. True diplomacy isn't about making everyone follow the same rules, John continued. It's about understanding each other despite our differences. The doors to the chamber opened again, and Doug Wilson entered. The Earth scientist carried a small device in his hands. Sorry I'm late, Doug said. I was finishing my analysis. Zeal-Torque stood up straighter. Another interruption. This is fascinating data. Doug cut in, activating his device. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing a graph with a line that rose sharply, then gradually flattened. This shows technological advancement across council species over the last 15,000 years, Doug explained. Notice anything interesting? The council members stared at the display. The line began to flatten around 5,000 years ago. Progress slowed dramatically right around the time your etiquette rules became most strict, Doug pointed out. When you stopped challenging each other and started focusing on perfect ceremony instead. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. John could see anger on some faces, but also thoughtfulness on others. How dare you subjust? Zornax began. He is right, a new voice said. Ambassador Yiel of the Proxians, a species known for their logical thinking, stood up. My scientists have noted this pattern as well, but we never spoke of it openly. It would have been impolite. Yiel moved to stand beside John. For 3 centuries, my people have felt stifled by traditions that serve no purpose. We follow them because we must, not because they help us grow or learn. The ambassador turned to the council. Perhaps it is time to consider that perfect etiquette and perfect progress rarely exist together. John looked around the room. Some ambassadors were clearly outraged, but others seemed to be considering these words carefully. I'm not saying throw away all your traditions, John said, just that maybe it's time to question which ones actually matter. Elder Jen made a sound that might have been a chuckle. In 10,000 years on this council, I have never heard such honest words spoken in this chamber. The elder turned to the silent observers in their corner. What say you, oldest of us all? You who have watched our rituals grow more complex with each passing age. For the first time in living memory, one of the observers moved, turning its hidden face toward John. The entire chamber went still, waiting. The observer who had turned toward John remained silent, but a slight nod of its hooded head sent shockwaves through the chamber. Never in recorded history had an observer acknowledged a speaker directly. This is madness, Zornax hissed. Are we to abandon thousands of years of tradition because one primitive species finds it inconvenient? His words seemed to break a dam. Suddenly, multiple ambassadors began speaking at once, without waiting to be recognized by the moderator. Itself a serious breach of protocol. Perhaps the human has a point, said the representative of the Tellurians, removing her ceremonial head covering. An item that tradition dictated must be worn at all times in council chambers. The Vaporians, who had maintained a formal pale blue color during all council meetings for millennia, suddenly shifted to a vibrant purple. According to Patricia Ross, Earth's diplomatic analyst who had just entered the chamber, this was a sign of rebellion in Vaporian culture. They're expressing agreement with John, she whispered to Captain Martinez. I've never seen anything like this. These species haven't changed their formal behaviors in thousands of years. Across the room, representatives from the Axioni and Meldari species, who had not directly addressed each other in over 3,000 years due to an ancient disagreement about proper greeting forms, began speaking animatedly. "Your species was right about the hand positioning," the Axioni ambassador admitted. "We were being stubborn. And yours was correct about the vocal tones," the Meldari replied. "It seems foolish now that we wasted so much time." Phil Torque banged his ceremonial staff on the floor repeatedly, trying to restore order. "This is unprecedented. Return to proper protocol immediately." No one paid him any attention. Several younger ambassadors had removed parts of their formal attire, looking visibly relieved to be free of the heavy ceremonial garments. Zornax and several other traditionalist ambassadors rose from their seats in unified protest. "If this council will not respect its own sacred traditions, we will not participate," the Hectarian declared. "Earth and any who side with them will face diplomatic sanctions." With that, nearly a third of the council members marched toward the exit, their ceremonial robes swishing dramatically. "Did we just break the Galactic Council?" John asked quietly to Captain Martinez. "I think you did," she replied, watching the scene with a mixture of horror and fascination. "In just 3 days." Elder Jen approached them, moving slowly with the aid of a gnarled walking stick. "The council has needed breaking for some time," the ancient alien said. "We have forgotten that rules should serve a purpose beyond tradition." John looked around at the remaining ambassadors, who were talking freely now, many laughing or gesturing expressively, behaviors strictly forbidden during formal council sessions. "What happens now?" he asked. "That," Elder Jen replied, "is the most exciting question I have heard in several thousand years." John thought for a moment, then smiled. "Would any of you like to come aboard the Frontier for an informal gathering? No ceremonies, no rituals, just a chance to talk as equals." Phil Torque, who had remained despite his obvious distress at the breakdown of protocol, looked scandalized. "Diplomatic meetings must occur on neutral ground. That is the most basic." "I would be honored," interrupted Ambassador Yiel of the Proxians. Several others quickly voiced their agreement. Zil Torque's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Finally, he too stormed out of the chamber. Patricia Ross quickly moved among the remaining ambassadors, documenting what was clearly a historic moment in galactic politics. "This will change everything," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "The power balance that has existed for millennia is shifting before our eyes." John turned to Captain Martinez. "I hope the mess hall is clean. We're about to host the galaxy's first interspecies casual mixer." For the first time since their arrival, Captain Martinez smiled genuinely. "I'll have the crew prepare immediately." And John, "Yes, Captain. Good job breaking all the rules." The mess hall of the Frontier had been quickly transformed for the occasion. The standard metal tables were covered with colorful cloths from Earth. String lights hung from the ceiling, and music played softly in the background. "It's not exactly a formal council chamber," Captain Martinez said as she surveyed the room. John smiled. "That's exactly the point. When the first ambassadors arrived, they seemed unsure how to behave without their usual protocol to guide them. Elder Jen entered first, having shed most of the heavy ceremonial robes for a simpler garment. "Welcome aboard," John said, extending his hand before remembering and quickly pulling it back. "Sorry, old habit." "No," Elder Jen said, reaching out with a gnarled hand. "I would like to try this human greeting." As they shook hands, other ambassadors entered. Many had changed into simpler clothing. The Vaporians were still a vibrant purple, swirling more freely than John had seen before. "They seem happier," John observed. "The formal color state requires great concentration to maintain," explained Ambassador Yiel. "It is exhausting to hold for hours during council sessions." "Then why do it?" John asked. "Because it has always been done," Yiel replied simply. Then added, "Until today." Throughout the evening, The human crew members mingled with the alien guests. Chief Engineer Gregory Nash showed several interested ambassadors the engine room. "Your propulsion system is fascinating," the Tellurian ambassador said. "We have similar technology, but your approach is unexpected." Greg grinned. "That's humans for you. We often find strange ways to solve problems." In another corner, Medical Officer Olivia Clark was discussing healing practices with a group of alien scientists. "You treat illness with modified viruses?" asked a blue-skinned alien. "That seems dangerously unpredictable." "Sometimes the best solutions are a bit risky," Olivia explained, "but the results can be worth it." Security Chief Frank Miller was awkwardly attempting to mimic an alien greeting ritual, making the Proxian ambassador laugh. "Close enough," Yeel said kindly. "The exact finger positioning hasn't mattered for centuries, though we all pretend it does." As the evening progressed, John noticed that the conversations became more relaxed. Without the formal translators, communication was sometimes difficult, but also more real. Jokes were attempted. Cultural stories were shared. Questions that would have been considered rude in the council chamber were asked openly and answered honestly. Near the end of the gathering, Elder Jen approached John with a surprising revelation. "I should tell you something about our council protocols," the ancient alien said quietly. "Many were not created for the reasons we claim." John raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The elaborate entry rituals, the specific seating arrangements, the formal speech patterns." Elder Zen's voice dropped even lower. "They were originally designed not as meaningful traditions but as tests." "Tests for what?" John asked. "Conformity. Obedience." The elder's eyes seemed to look into the distant past. In the early days of the council, new species were evaluated based on how well they followed arbitrary rules. Those who questioned too much were deemed unpredictable, dangerous. John felt a chill run down his spine. So all these customs began as a way to ensure that only species who valued order above all else would rise to prominence. Elder Jen finished. "Over time, we forgot the purpose and worshiped the form." Across the room, Captain Martinez was speaking with Ambassador Yeel. "Your John Carter has changed everything," the Proxian said. "Already, messages are flying between worlds. The traditionalists are organizing formal protests, of course." "And the others?" Martins asked. "Are experiencing something many haven't felt in generations." Yeel's facial ridges lifted in what might have been a smile. "Freedom to speak directly, to question, to change." As the gathering began to wind down, John looked around the room at humans and aliens talking together freely. The barriers of protocol had been broken, and something new was taking shape. "This is just the beginning, isn't it?" he asked Elder Jen. The ancient alien nodded slowly. "The galaxy has been static for too long. Change was inevitable. It just needed a catalyst." 2 standard months had passed since the historic breakdown of council protocol. John stood by the viewport in his new office on the rebuilt council station, watching ships from dozens of worlds come and go. "Ambassador Carter," said Susan Wright as she entered the room. "The delegates are ready for the joint session." John smiled at his new title. After the split in the council, Earth had become the unofficial headquarters for what was now called the Progressive Alliance, those species who had chosen a more direct approach to diplomacy. "How many traditionalists showed up?" he asked as they walked toward the meeting chamber. 7 representatives, Susan replied. "More than last time. I think they're getting curious about our success." The new meeting room looked nothing like the old council chamber. Instead of the perfect circle with identical seats, it featured a variety of seating options to accommodate different species comfortably. The lighting changed depending on which area you were in, adjusted for different visual systems. When John entered, some delegates nodded, others waved, and the Vaporians pulsed bright colors in greeting. No one stood or performed elaborate bowing sequences. On the far side of the room sat the representatives of the traditional Concordat, as the conservative faction now called themselves. They still wore their full ceremonial attire and looked uncomfortable with the casual atmosphere. "Welcome, everyone," John began. "Let's get started with the trade proposals." What followed was a straightforward discussion about shipping routes and resource sharing. The Progressive Alliance members spoke freely, interrupted each other occasionally, and even laughed when someone made a joke. The traditionalists followed their ancient protocols, waiting to be formally recognized before speaking, reciting traditional phrases before each statement, and maintaining rigid postures. Patricia Ross, now head of diplomatic relations, leaned close to Captain Martinez, who was visiting for the session. "Watch the traditionalists," she whispered. "See how they keep glancing at our side. They're 3 hours into what would normally be a 3-day formal negotiation, and we're almost finished." Martinez nodded. Efficiency can be very persuasive. After the main issues were resolved, Elder Jen rose slowly to address the gathering. "We have received a communication from the observers," the ancient alien announced. The room went silent. The observers had left with the traditionalist faction 2 months ago, maintaining their historical neutrality. "They wish to speak directly to this assembly," Elder Jen continued. "This has not happened in 7,000 years." The doors to the chamber opened, and 3 robed figures entered. The traditionalists immediately performed elaborate bows. The Progressive Alliance members simply waited. The lead observer raised its hands and lowered its hood, revealing a face that looked surprisingly similar to a human's, but with entirely silver eyes. "For 10,000 years, we have watched and waited," the observer said, its voice soft but clear. "We have observed species rise and fall, protocols grow and strangle progress." The observer turned to look directly at John. "We withdrew from active participation when the Council became more concerned with form than substance. We have been waiting for a species that would challenge rigid thinking." John's eyes widened. "You've been waiting for someone to break the rules." "We have been waiting for someone to remember why rules exist, to serve life, not to constrain it." The observer moved to the center of the room. "We have knowledge that was deemed too disruptive for the protocol-bound Council. Knowledge we are now willing to share." The traditionalists murmured in shock. The Progressive Alliance members leaned forward with interest. John, not thinking about what he was doing, moved to a nearby seat to listen more comfortably, accidentally sitting in the special chair reserved only for observers. There was a moment of tense silence as everyone noticed his mistake. The traditionalists looked horrified, waiting for the observer's outrage. Instead, the lead observer made a sound, a clear, ringing laugh. "And that," it said, "is exactly why humans might be ready for what we have to teach." The laughter spread through the Progressive Alliance members. Even some of the traditionalists couldn't hide small smiles. Captain Martinez shook her head but was smiling too. "Earth diplomacy," she said quietly to Susan Wright. "Breaking all the rules and somehow making it work." Susan nodded. "Maybe that's our special contribution to the galaxy." In his accidental seat of honor, John grinned. Sometimes being yourself was the best protocol of all.